Hello students, this video is going to help you prepare to plan out and start your rough draft. I know many of you have started an outline and you've got some headings planned out for your paper. Those headings should be flexible and you can decide to change them as you go, but essentially your outline for your paper should become your APA headings. And I can show you how that works later, but I'm just going to show you the basic steps of how to go from having your sources and your annotated bibliography to soon having a working outline, and maybe even a rough draft. If you are planning in the old-fashioned way where you make an outline and you start putting details into it and evidence into it, then it's very likely that your outline will just soon become your rough draft. And that seems to be the easiest way for many people to write. Although there are other ways. You can write a section at a time and then start putting them together and organizing them later. You can do that. I like to take a little more of a holistic approach by planning out my outline and adding in my evidence with my authors that I know I'm going to cite, and then filling in the details later as I go. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And we're going to start by first looking at your rubric so that you know you're on track doing what you're supposed to do for this paper. And this can be found on Blackboard. So you can see there's an A range, B range, C range, D, and below. We're just going to look for the A range because we're going to assume everybody wants to get an A. So the A range has a category for content and argument, structure and organization, and style and mechanics. Typically, the style and mechanics is actually weighted a little bit less, so because those are easy, small things to fix. But these other two categories are pretty important. So we want to really pay attention to those, especially in the first steps of writing. So our content and organization, it says the paper conducts a thorough, detailed exploration of a teaching strategy or set of strategies that benefit diverse learners. We know that because we've picked topics that are relevant to diverse student populations. The paper represents a clear, persuasive argument through several examples of relevant current research. You know, you have to have at least 5 research articles and 10 sources overall, ideally. And it could be more research articles. It could be other things, maybe books, maybe websites, videos, things like that might work. The paper presents a detailed summary of at least one major learning theory as a foundation for the argument. So you do need to have a theory in there. And we spent the last few weeks prior to this working on that. You did a group presentation. You're able to access other people's group presentations to see some famous theorists. I also provide you a lot of resources on theories you can use. And it is important that we cite some kind of theory as we're making an argument with research. Okay, the next section here is structure and organization. So this is important when we're writing a research paper, particularly in APA. The paper includes a well-written thesis statement that clearly introduces the overall argument of the research. Of course, we must have a thesis statement. It should be in the first couple paragraphs of your paper. Somewhere in that introduction, I should be easily able to identify a sentence or two that tells me what this paper is going to answer, what questions, and stated clearly what your conclusions will be in this paper. It is not meant to be the kind of thing where you have to read to find out. It really should all be right there in the beginning. So there's a lot of spoilers in a research paper, right? The introduction is clearly there to tell us what we're going to find out. The next thing here under structure and organization says the paper demonstrates a careful thought and organization throughout the introduction, body, and conclusion with effective transitions. So careful thought in organization means that I've really thought about what order this should go in. I've planned it out. It doesn't feel like I'm just citing all my sources in a list and summarizing them. That's what an annotated bibliography does for you. But you'll see today that that annotated bibliography, which you completed, should be the foundation in the beginning to help you start writing. And you can actually use a lot of those summaries that you already wrote in your writing, and it helps you get started. So on Blackboard, you'll see there's a handout. And the first handout you're going to see is planning a research paper. There are 3 steps to get started. Review your notes. What do your researchers agree on? The authors that you're planning on citing. Look through those sources. You need at least 5 research articles. Those might be quantitative studies. They might be qualitative studies. They might be a meta study, which means it's like a literature review that cites a bunch of research, but not doing their own original. So you could use those. It could be a mixed method study. There's all kinds of possibilities, but you need to have at least 5. Okay, make sure that those are peer-reviewed research articles. And if you still are struggling with those and you're not sure if they're on topic or they're correct for your paper, then let me know. We can look at them together and decide if those will suffice or not. There could be something better out there for you. And remember that as you're writing, you might decide that you need more research on a certain subtopic that you're going to write about, and you can go back and add more. I know that I tend to find a lot more articles than I actually end up using. And I'll show you that process in a moment. But I usually find a lot of them, and then I end up eliminating several before I actually write and include it in my paper. The next step is to form your thesis statement based on what you learned in the research articles. So you should have already done your article evaluations a few weeks back. You turned those in, you did your annotated bibliography. So now what are all these pieces of research telling you about your topic? From what it's telling you and what you learn, you should be able to write a statement that clearly shows the argument you're going to make. If you need help writing that, sign up for a small group meeting and I can help you. The third step is to choose an approach that works for you to plan. So a lot of people do an outline. I encourage you to do that. If you are a more visual person and you prefer a web or note cards or something like that, that's fine. As long as you are planning and you can show that, then I'm okay with that. But you do need to plan. I know many people are just used to writing in the way that you were taught in high school, which is a very simple outline and write your paper and then go back and add your sources in there. That's backwards. You find your sources, you read your sources, what do they tell you? And then you plan according to what those experts say. That's what we do now as adults in college. I know it's different than the way you were taught in high school and maybe even some community college classes if you did that there and you went that other way. It's simpler that way, but we're not going in with any certain attitude or mind made up, right? We're looking at what the articles are telling us and what the research tells us, and that's how we make our conclusions. We are still going to be persuasive, but we're going to be persuasive on this topic based on what we've learned through the experts. So I prefer an outline, but you can use whatever method you like, but you must plan. And I will show you my method for planning an outline in a moment. There are three main popular ways to organize your paper into sections. And I know that this might be new to some of you if you've not written an APA paper before, particularly one that has a lot of sources like this, but you must have sections in your paper. You must have headings. Everyone will have headings in their paper. Sometimes in MLA papers, we tend to just write and it's a whole bunch of paragraphs that flow into the next one. That's not really what we do in APA. We lay out a map and we use headings to guide the reader through what we're doing. So it actually is much easier once you get used to it. And there are ways you can decide to organize those sections. You can do it in chronological order. So perhaps you have a topic that traces the changes in a certain approach to teaching, like you want to look at the history of how laws have changed treating English learners or special education students, something like that. If you were really interested in something that has changed over time, you would use chronological order. In this case, for our class, you probably aren't doing that, but you could. It's possible, depending on your topic. And it's also just something to think about for future courses. You might be writing a paper like that someday. Most people will choose the second one, that's subtopics, meaning I have a few main topics, and then within it, I'm going to have some subtopics that match it. And I think that's what most of you will end up doing. There is also the possibility of a pro versus con, and that's typically set aside for those controversial sort of topics. So if you have a topic that a lot of people are really have strong feelings about, there's a lot of research on both sides, then maybe you want to present it as a pro versus con. And you have to explore both sides, but you have to really pick a side that you want to be the winner based on what your research says. And so I'll give you an example of that would be, I had a student in the past that wrote a paper on grade retention, which is when a teacher decides that a student is not up to grade level and they get held back and they repeat that grade. And so this person went in with the idea that they were for it and the teachers they had talked to were for it. So they thought that would probably be their conclusion. And all the research they found was actually con against it. So they did not write their paper in such a way that they were trying to convince people it was a good idea. They actually changed their mind because that's what the research shows. So it's a good example that you can present a pro versus con, but don't go in with your mind made up until you've read all those articles. Now, there are probably plenty of articles out there on both sides, but this person happened to find more against it. Okay. So that's the planning handout, and this is on Blackboard for you to look at. I'm going to show you now an example of a project that I've been working on. And this is an actual article that I'm writing with some of my colleagues, and it's already out for publication. We don't know when it will be published or which place it will be published. We've submitted it to one journal. We will see, and I'll let you know in the future if it does get published there. But I want to show you the process so you can feel good about writing your annotated bibliography, because that is something that we all do. I do it still. So I'm going to show you my annotated bibliography for that article. So our topic happened to be related to online learning, especially because of COVID. All of us went to teaching online, but me and this other group of professors, we were actually already researching this topic. And so we were already interested in it even before COVID happened, and we all had to do it. So what I did was I went onto the library databases and I started searching a lot of articles. And you can see that if I go into my sources here in my Google Drive, I had a lot of sources set aside. Eventually, I ended up not using all of them. Okay, and that's okay, right? I find them, I get the citation for it, and I put it on my annotated bibliography. There's a citation, and then I go through and I read through it, and if I think it's going to work, I put it on my list, and then I save it in my drive so I have access to it. And then what I do is I go back later and I read the abstract and I skim the article. I'm going to spend tons of time, just a little bit, and I try to gather what I can from it. And if it seems like it's going to work, then I put it into the folder with my sources. Now, it still might get eliminated later, right? And that's okay. But if I think it's going to work, then I save it here and I go ahead and I go back later and I reread it and I write a short summary, just like you did for your class where you wrote an annotated bibliography and you had a summary of each article you thought you would be using. That's exactly what I do too, okay? And this is the process that I'm teaching you. It's not just a check-in to see if you found your work. It's actually the beginning steps of writing a good paper. So you can see that what I did was I got all my sources, I cited them, and then I wrote a summary paragraph afterwards. And these summary paragraphs eventually will make their way into my actual article. Now they're going to get changed a lot, and they're going to get moved around and edited and changed in size. They might be just a little bit, maybe I only use a couple sentences of it. Maybe I add more to it. It doesn't matter. I can make adjustments as I go. But you can see that this is the process that you started, and that's exactly what I do too. So without reading all of it, you can see that I have a lot of sources here, and I've got my summaries for each. And so then once I've got that, now what I do is I go back and I'm going to start my outline. So I begin by reading through my own summaries. And then I can go back and I can pull up the article itself if I need to. But what I do is I read my own summary of the article and I decide, what is this mostly about? So with this first one, it's mostly about online learning tools, right? So if we can see here, it talks about tools that are most useful, different kinds of digital tools that are used in courses, video presentations, voice thread and video chat, blogs, social networking tools, and presentation software. So it talks a lot about different kinds of tools that these researchers found useful. And so on my outline, it's going to look very basic. Now, the article is actually already done. You can see I'm just kind of going, this is a big paper, but it's probably twice as long or 3 times as long as what you're going to do. But you can see it's already done, right? But this is the beginning stages. So I'm going backwards here for you. So I took my summary here and I decided what this was about. And I went ahead and put that topic, effective tools. And then what I did was I took the names of the authors, right? And I pasted them right underneath there so that I know when I go back to write my paper, those are the people I'm going to cite in that section. Okay. And then what I do next is I go to my next one and I read this one and I decide, what is this one about? Is this also about effective tools? And if it is, then I'm going to take this person's name and I'm going to put them in that same spot. If it's not, and it's about something different, then I'm going to figure out what that new topic is, right? So let's see. It says Benson makes a compelling argument for the use of distance and online learning as a tool to combat not only a digital divide, but also a tool to promote social justice by providing equitable access to low-income workers who would otherwise be non-traditional college students or have no access at all. Benson cites the increased need for a college-educated workforce while also depicting serious barriers in low-income populations face with distance learning. Okay, so we've got some access issues with low access to technology, but also it's an equity issue because it's hard for working people to get over to college, and so online learning might work for them. So I don't think that's really good, talking about the same thing as the previous. So I think this is a new topic. So I'm going to call this one access. I'm going to make a new category here, maybe access and equity, right? And then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to see who was this. This was Benson. I'm going to put the name and the year just so I remember when I go to write who I need to include. And I'm just going to keep going this way through my annotated bibliography. Okay. And if I come across another one that matches these two topics, I will just add those authors underneath. And that's all I'll need to do for that. And then eventually I will have several topics here, you can see, and then I will have the authors with whom I'm going to cite in that section. Okay, so that's a good way to start your outline. Eventually, what I would probably do is go back and take my summary and decide, do I want to use this? I might just copy and paste this whole paragraph in there, right? Maybe I'll just add it in here and I'll probably edit it and make some changes, right? I might change some things around and shorten it, whatever. And I'll keep doing this until I've got a full-fledged set of topics here and article summaries underneath, but that's not going to be enough. Eventually, I'm going to have to take those paragraphs because they're just going to summarize one article after another, and I'm going to have to synthesize them a little bit, right? I'm going to have to figure out which authors seem like they're saying the same thing and try to probably combine those into the same paragraph. Maybe I decide that under effective tools, there's a lot of subtopics. And so maybe I will make some subtopics, right? I might do one on instructional tools. And then another one might be something else. Another one might be something like, let's say, I know I wrote a lot about LMS, which is the learning management systems. Capitalize it. Okay, and then I would put whoever I should under that one. And eventually you'll see that my little outline of topics is going to become a nice little rough draft, right? It's going to have the resemblance of a paper. It's not quite there, but it will eventually start looking like a paper. And I can start deleting things that I think are repetitive. I can start combining things. I can add new paragraphs if I think something is missing. But that is the process I suggest you take. I'm going to now share with you the other handout, which you can also find on Blackboard. And this is all on drafting your paper. So once you've got your outline created, you've got your topics, you've got your sources, and you know which sources are going to feed which topic, then you're going to follow this, okay? These are some tips for writing. Use your time wisely. Spread it out, right? Read and reread. As I'm writing, I'm going to go back and read those articles, read the important sections of those articles again. It's probably good to write one section at a time, and no, you should not just start with the introduction. Most people think that's where you have to start. That is not where you have to start. In fact, I would say that's probably the best that you do that last. The best thing to do would be to pick the sections you feel most comfortable with and start working there. Always keep your work in a backup of some sort on the cloud. I suggest Drive, but you can use whatever you like. Start your reference page early and add the sources as you come along and take them out as you decide they don't fit, right? Of course. And so you want to make sure that you have those already laid out. I did that the first thing, right? I showed you that my first thing I did was find my sources and my references and make all my citations. And then I build from there. The last thing is to get feedback. You're going to get feedback later this week, and that's important, and you'll be given more information on how to do that and what that will do for you as you move forward and working on your rough draft. I hope that this helps you, and please look out for those announcements about small group meetings if you want to sign up for one, and I can work with you and you can get some feedback from someone else as you're building this outline and rough draft. Good luck on your paper, and please let me know if you need any more help.